She's not what you'd expect. She's tough and feisty, but gentle and tender. She makes millions and gives millions to the poor. She cries, she laughs, she teaches, she comforts. This is the Dani Johnson Show.
Welcome to the Dani Johnson Show. We're so blessed that you decided to join us today. Today is going to be a little bit different. You know, we like to set off one day out of the entire week where we really have a spiritual focus. And why? Because when your spiritual life is a mess, everything else seems to be a mess too. This is why this day we're going to just take a real quick pause and dive into the best success book ever written and talk about spiritual matters. Because I know for me that when I don't have my priorities straight, and for me personally, my first priority has to be the one that I serve, the only one that is worthy of me serving. And that's not a human on this earth, but it's the God that created the heavens and the earth. And he also planted me inside of my mama's womb. He brought me forth into this world. I made lots of mistakes and messes with the life that he gave me, especially early on. And I still make stupid mistakes, sometimes daily, weekly, monthly. But at the same time, this life that we've been given, I believe, and I've watched it happen in so many people's lives as well, is that when they make him first, everything else seems to start coming into order. And so today we're going to be talking about something really exciting, really, really exciting. And today also, because it is a special, we have no commercial breaks when we're going to be talking about the most important success book that's ever been written. Even though the Dani Johnson Show is about success every day, and honestly, the foundation of every single show that I do comes out of that same book. We like to have one day where there's no interruptions. It's just you and me, and we're going to dive deep into understanding things that will help to set your life free, whether it be finances or your career, with your family, with your health, with your future, with the calling that you know that is inside of your life. There's something that's calling out of you, and it is a destiny. There's something that you were formed in your mother's womb for, and it wasn't just to take oxygen here on planet Earth, but it was for something that has great purpose. And so I want to talk to you today about something that the news would never ever report, but it is so newsworthy. The news likes to totally fill our minds with fear. It likes to fill our minds with hopelessness. It also likes to fill our minds with problems and worries, and then we carry anxiety from one moment to the next and one day to the next, and years fly by and we're filled with anxiousness simply because we watched Channel 7 News or something like that. Well, I'm going to report something that the news will not report. I'm going to report something that magazines will not report. Something miraculous has been taking place. I don't know if you've noticed it, but since the turn of the new year, the new calendar year, something has shifted here on the planet. Something has changed, even in those that are around me. And as spring approaches, it's like, I don't know, there's a freshness that's happening. It's not normal. It's something that's actually abnormal. It's kind of super and natural, super on top of natural. It's divine. I don't know if you have felt it, but I think that after today, you are going to have an incredible impartation of great faith. You're not going to live your life the same way you've been living it after you're done with the teaching that I'm going to give you. So you might want to pull out a notepad, a piece of paper. If you're driving in your car listening to this might be a pull over until your next appointment. I'm going to be late. I'll talk to you in about an hour. I'm serious. This is that important. It really, really is that important. So get ready for your faith to be built. Get ready for hope to be renewed. Get ready for you to learn about something that is historical, something that is biblical, something that is now right here and current, and that is making a difference all over the world. So there's actually two different groups that I'm going to talk about, all right? And these two different groups, I want you to picture yourself in each one of these groups, all right? I don't want them to be groups that are outside of you. I want you to imagine yourself, as I explained the first group, I want you to imagine that you are living as this person in the first group. And then when I introduce you to the second group, I want you to imagine yourself being and living and breathing and working in this second group, okay? So that's important for you to really grasp the revelation as well as grasp the miracle that is taking place. And then you can kind of pick which group that you want to be associated with. So oftentimes, friend, we live life which is so no purpose. We live it with just short-term things that really mean nothing. And so many of us, I know for me and my husband and my family, we had lived without purpose. We lived with going nowhere and running towards nowhere, not even realizing that we were running towards nowhere, and not setting a very good example for our kids either. And I'm happy to say that we've corrected those things. And we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and neither is our family. We have the same exact problems that everybody else's family has. This is called life on planet Earth with humans. There's always going to be problems. But I can tell you that there is a satisfaction that has been birthed inside of me, that I want to be birthed inside of you. I want you to experience this miracle. And I want you to experience this miracle so much that you start to infect other people with this miracle of great satisfaction and living a life of great purpose. So let's get started. I want you to imagine that you're like Pablo and Sandra and Audelis. Let's just say that by chance you were born into extreme poverty. Okay, this is group A. You're born into extreme poverty. And that extreme poverty looks like this. Well, there's no food every day. And there's no clean water. Which means there's not a faucet, there's not a toilet, there's not a sink, there's not a kitchen, there's not a bathroom. Do you understand? There's no grass outside that's being watered. Okay? Just imagine that I want you to see your surroundings. And I have to tell you how I came in contact with this. I was in Nicaragua recently. And my father, when I was heading down to Nicaragua, my father, who is from Nicaragua, he lives in Portland, Oregon now, and he's he's my biological father. I wasn't raised by him. I met him when I was 18, and we have an amazing relationship now for 27 years. And he told me, he says, honey, I love what you're doing with helping people and building homes. If you can, please go look at your Tia Teresa's house, and maybe you could do something for her. So I go and I see this place, and I see the place that my first cousin, not my distant cousin, but my first cousin. And I see that her bedroom is really not a bedroom, but there is a bed there. And the bed basically is, something on wood with kind of clothes and stuff like that on top of it. But more importantly, the floor is mud. It's a mud floor. All right. And there's just scrap wood that has created this box, if you will, that she calls her room. When I saw this, my friend, it just broke me. I posted some pictures on Facebook with this, and there's a picture of both of us crying as the interpreter, because I can't speak my Spanish. And when I was hearing this, I was thinking to myself, I could have been born here so easily. My father was, he's Nicaraguan. He was very industrious with women, I guess. I don't know how else to say it and make it clean, but he just, you know what I'm saying? He fooled around a lot. He impregnated a lot of women, and he left Nicaragua when he was 18. But if he had impregnated a woman that could have been my mother while I was in Nicaragua, I could have been born in extreme poverty like Pablo and Sandra and Audelis. There is no kitchen. In their case, they're even more extreme poor than what my family is in Nicaragua. So we're talking, will there be food today? They really don't know when they wake up that morning. In fact, I asked the question of Pablo and Sandra. I said, is there food today? Or like, no. How are you? What are you going to eat today? And he says, only by the hand of God. They don't even know, what are they going to eat today? So it's kind of like a day of kind of scrounging and trying to find something to feed their 6-year-old son. Yikes. They've got a 23-year-old daughter who also has a baby and also has a 4-year-old son. So imagine that this is you, okay? There's no television, there's no internet, there's not cell phones, there's not a car, there's no transportation, there's no buses that come to the area where you're living, all right? Can you picture this? There's no worry about what you're going to wear because you have one thing to wear. Do you understand? There's no worry about, getting a new bed because you're just hoping for a bed that's something other than a piece of plywood that you put a cloth over, and there are no pillows. Okay? You're not worried about how to decorate your home because there is no decorations. There isn't at all. Do you understand what I'm saying? So imagine that this is your life. You do not have the ability to decorate your home. You don't have the ability to use a toilet. You use the tree. You use the bush that's outside your home. Not only that, but I want you to imagine that your home is built on top of an abandoned mine, a gold mine. And that abandoned gold mine has, well, dynamite that's blown in it just a little bit away, and it shakes your home every 6 hours. And your neighbor, just a few months ago, she was pregnant. Maria was her name. She's pregnant, 8 months pregnant. And when that dynamite blew at 1 a.m., it shook the house that she was in. She kept sleeping because she's used to it. Well, at 3 a.m., the earth gave way, opened up, and swallowed her and her house. And she was buried alive, 8 months pregnant. This is your neighbor. And you found your neighbor after 17 hours of digging and searching. And she's dead. And so is the unborn child. Imagine if this is your life. It's not a matter of getting home on time so you can watch your favorite television show. It's not a matter of what you're going to wear to work tomorrow or school tomorrow. And it's not a matter of going to your fridge and opening it up and saying there's no food to eat and the fridge, freezer, and pantry is full to the brim. There's nothing to eat in here. These people would love to take what you say is no food because it would be a feast for them. So that's the first group. I want you to imagine that group. Now I want you to imagine another group. It's a group that, well, you don't have to do much imagining because they're very similar to you. It's a group of people that are hardworking. They are paying their bills the best that they can. Sometimes they miss them, sometimes they don't. It's a people that, well, they tapped into the same website that you tapped into, DaniJohnson.com. And this group of people have been reading books like First Steps to Wealth, which I hope you have your copy of, or Spirit-Driven Success, Grooming the Next Generation for Success. It's a people who've been tapping into the live training seminars, and they started to pay off debt, and they started to live more rightly financially instead of being foolish financially. Maybe they cut back on how many times a week they're eating out now. They've got a little bit more purpose. They've got some vision. They've utilized some of the materials from the website like job domination, and they've gotten some raises and some promotions, and they've improved their relationships at home with their spouse, and they've just seen life differently now. And now here's this group, and it's a large group of them. And they're from all over the world. So they've become a community. They've kind of glued themselves together with a common vision. And the common vision is, yes, they want to live debt-free, and yes, they want to treat their spouses right, and they want to groom the next generation for success that's in their homes, and yes, they want to travel around the world, and they want to maybe pay off their grandparents' debt, and they want to be free financially, and they want to build businesses or build their careers and really set a good example out there in the world. And they want to do right before their God. So that's another group. But here's what's happening inside of this other group. Well, first of all, who is this group? They're people of all kinds of backgrounds, right? I mean, highly educated, no education. You got people who are entrepreneurs. You got other people who work for entrepreneurs. You got some that are stay-at-home parents and some that are not. Some that have no kids at all. You have some that come from high-paying professions and others that don't come from high-paying professions at all. Some that are really up there in their years of life, and then there's some that are young kids, like 4 years old. That's who is in this group. And what are they doing? They're actually listening with spiritual ears, which is my prayer for you. They're listening with spiritual ears. They've been actually given a superpower, if you will. They've been given an advantage that most people don't have. And it's very clear that this group, this second group, that they actually have this gift. And it's a gift that only God could actually give. It's kind of a crazy gift because they can hear maybe his voice. And even when they read his book, they can hear him talking to them. And as they're living out their days, they seek him first. This group, they're really a live group. I'm talking about real people here. I'm not talking about anything hypothetical. I'm talking about real people. Like I was saying about Idleness and and Pablo and Sandra, those are real people. I've been in their homes. I've held their children. I've kissed their faces. I've hugged their necks. Do you understand? These are real people. And same with the other group that I'm talking about that have all these different wild backgrounds and educational levels and all that stuff. I've hugged their necks. I've hugged their children. I've kissed their cheeks. I've cried with them. I've helped to solve problems with them. I've taught them the things that God's taught me about money and debt and business and people and relationship and travel and purpose. You know, I've taught these people these things. So these are real, living, breathing people. Okay, they're real. This is not a made up story. Kind of like how the news can make up some stories for us, right? Isn't it awesome? Anyway, so these people have been given a gift, and this gift has been ignited inside of them. Not only have they gotten spiritual ears, which have made their ears to hear things that normal people cannot hear, but they've also been given spiritual eyes, where they're able to see the unseen. They're able even to see solutions to problems that others cannot see solutions to. They've actually been able to see truth in a place of lies. They've been able to find solutions with their eyes. They've been able to see solutions to the most impossible set of circumstances. These people are rare, and they are a unique breed that is not like any other I've seen on the earth. They've actually put purpose to their hands. Their hands are not just like normal hands. Yes, their hands type on their keyboards. And yes, you know, those that are contractors and build houses, you know, yes, they do those things. And yes, they feed themselves. They cook for their families. Yes, they do all that. But their hands have been anointed by God to do something so powerful. Now, you might say, where do these people come from? They came from messes. Some of them really bad, broken backgrounds. Some of them were adulterers. Some of them were liar cheaters. Some of them were ex-convicts. Some of them were terribly rude and hurtful to their wives. And some of these wives were just wicked to their husbands. Some of these kids were on drugs. Some of them did time in jail. Some of these were just total financial failures. I don't want you to get the wrong picture about this group, because I know that what I've described so far, before I just told you about their dirt, they sounded kind of perfect, right? They sounded like they were from a different planet, because, you know, how could people be like this? Well, these people didn't start off that way. Some of them were jerks, filled with pride and ego. They cared about no one but themselves. They were just sucking up oxygen on the planet. Some of them were addicted to pornography. Some of them were addicted to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Some of them were wasting their life away in front of the television. You know, their greatest excitement was Seinfeld. Like, really? You know, they were consumed. Some of them were consumed with gossip and destruction of other people. Some of them were just not paying their bills, but instead feeding themselves on hundreds of dollars a week of beautiful, luxurious food that they somehow thought they deserved, but yet they weren't making their house payments. Some of them were people who just lived in absolute selfishness. But something miraculous happened. God touched their lives in a very unique place with a very unique message. And these people said yes to the message. And their hands are no longer the same anymore. Their eyes and their ears are no longer the same. In fact, their heart is not even the same anymore. Their heart has been completely transformed into something that is so powerful. Yeah, that heart still beats with blood, but it also beats with passion and vision and focus and determination and worthiness to do something powerful. The best way I can explain these people is it's almost like they're mutants. You know, like the movie X-Men? Seriously, they literally are like X-Men. They were born with these, you know, they were born with the basics of what every one of us were born with. But something has come on these people. A spirit has come on these people. And they now have a love for people they don't even know. They have a passion for a people they don't even know. And now they perceive themselves and they perceive people who they normally would never care about. They perceive people like Pablo and Adolis and Sandra, people they don't know, people that they may never meet, they perceive them as family. They look at that and say, I must do something. So let's take a pause. If you've been around me and you've been to our training seminars, then you are familiar with a concept that I outline in First Steps to Wealth, that free book that I told you about. You know about the concept of innovation. And you see, the greatest breakthroughs in innovation happen when two unrelated industries come together. When two unrelated industries come together, two unrelated entities come together, that's breakthrough in innovation. It's almost like a family, right? So you have a man and a woman who were not related that then join together as one flesh. They now become related, and now innovation happens. Baby number 1, baby number 2, in mine and Hans's case, baby's number 5. Okay, so the biggest breakthroughs in innovation happen when two unrelated things are brought together. Now, let me give you a story that I use often in our trainings about Federal Express. Those were two unrelated industries that were married together. So what two industries were married together with Federal Express? A courier service, which back in those days was a guy on a bicycle with a heart in his cooler, delivering it from one hospital to another. Or a guy on a bicycle with a box of files he's delivering from one legal firm to another legal firm. That pretty much courier service was pretty much just down to a small geographic location. But what the owner of Federal Express did is he brought another industry with courier services, and that was the airline industry. This was a huge breakthrough in innovation. Come on, back in those days, no one imagined that they can have a document delivered from New York City to China by 10:30 the next morning. Did not know that was even possible. But when people can think outside of the box and they can allow the greatest innovator of all time, which is God Almighty himself, when God Almighty himself can come upon a normal, natural human being that has all kinds of weaknesses and has a mess of a past, has all kinds of personal limitations, when you allow the Spirit of the Most High God to come upon your spirit, to come upon you, now there is almost like a superpower. There's a supernatural thing that happens. And I don't like using that word, but it's his divine power coming on our natural weaknesses and abilities. And now there is breakthrough that happens. So this group of people, God, the greatest innovator of all time, he has come upon this one group of people that are from all over the world who are just normal middle-class workers who once were working just for themselves, once working for their own personal selfish desires, people that were wanting another new car, people who were wanting another big house. And of course, I need the second house on the beach and I need a third house in the mountains. Okay. This normal group of people, normal middle-class family that, is going into debt to put their kids through college, that I need to buy Johnny a new car because he turned 16. The normal lifestyle of the middle class in general, the normal mindset of it, spending way too much on food, spending way too much on entertainment. So the greatest innovator of all time has now come on that normal people and has literally blown spiritual ears into their ears, spiritual eyes upon their eyes. He's touched their hands to make their hands do the work of something that is spiritual, supernatural, powerful. Their feet have been anointed by God to go into places boldly, into the marketplace, and to work and to take dominion in the marketplace for the kingdom of heaven, not just for the kingdom of themselves anymore. You see, that's what happens when we devote ourselves to God. He now transforms this body into something that is a force to be reckoned with in the marketplace. And he's looking for more people to add to that group. So what has happened here with these two groups? What's going on? Might be what you're asking. Why, Dani, are we spending this whole program on this? Because these two groups are being brought together. Yes. The greatest innovator of all time is grabbing the middle class who've devoted themselves to him. He's grabbed this extreme poor who've been crying out to him, who are tormented night and day, tormented. That every 6 hours that dynamite blasts beneath their feet. And they don't know if their 6-year-old son's going to die that day. I remember asking Pablo, what is your prayer? That God would just give me a little bit of good fortune. His answer, that we might live. He didn't ask for a car. He didn't ask for a house. He didn't even ask for food. That God would just give me just a little bit of good fortune so that we may live. You see, his idea of living and your idea of living is very different. So here, God Almighty has heard the cry of the poor in Santa Pancha, Nicaragua. He's transformed this people, normal people in the middle class, right? Living the life according to 98% of the population who ends up dead or dead broke at the age of 65. He blew his spirit. He filled them with his spirit, given them new hearts, new eyes, new ears, new hands, new feet, new ideas. And he's brought them together. Why? Because something powerful is happening. Something powerful has to happen. These people, the poor, have been crying. This other group that have new spiritual ears and eyes, hands and feet and a heart, they now can hear the cry of the poor. They can now hear the cry of the voiceless. Because this village that has 310 families in it, they have no voice. They have no voice. Can you hear their voice? Well, I'll tell you. That second group I was telling you about, they can hear all the way from here, the voice out of Santa Pancha, Nicaragua. They can hear it. Why? How's that possible? Only because God has given them the ears to hear it. It's powerful. Now you might be thinking, well, who cares? Who cares? I got to tell you a story. I was recently in a city. I was far away from the United States of America. And I was in the local market picking up some fruits and vegetables for dinner for the week. And there was this woman. She was mentally challenged. She had some kind of retardation in her. She was quite tall, fair-skinned, light eyes, big, thick glasses, mangled up hair, disheveled clothes. And she was wailing. And there were hundreds of people all around. And I had a friend with me. Hundreds of people all around. But I couldn't hear the chatter of all the people. But what I did hear, oh, oh, that's what she was sounding like. Oh, oh, oh. Right away when I heard her, I turned and I looked and saw that she was standing with a plastic clear cup. Oh, oh, oh. And something came over me. I couldn't help myself. I went right over to her. I pulled out my wallet and I took out the money and I put it in her cup. I don't even know if she knew that I did that. But I simply said to her, Baruch atah Yahweh, which is in her native language. Blessed are you, O God, Yahweh. Blessed are you, Yahweh. God blessed her with the money she needed that day. But that would not have happened had he did not change my hearing. 2 decades ago, I was a homeless woman, crying out, and nobody helped me. Nobody helped. My family wouldn't help. They had reasons, they're probably good reasons. I cried out, and there was one that heard me, and it was God Almighty, and he answered my cry. But as soon as I became successful, within 2 years of that time, I made my first million, and my ears got deaf to the needs of the true poor people. I didn't even see them. You see, they were around, but I didn't even see them. What do you mean, Dani, they were around? I don't know. They show up on TV, don't they? When you watch that commercial about the kid with the swollen belly and you see the flies flying inside of their eyeballs and, right, you snot coming down their nose. You know, I just ignored that, which meant I didn't have spiritual eyes to see the pain and the suffering. I didn't have spiritual ears to hear the hunger pains inside of that small little body, the frail fragments of legs and arms and a swollen belly. I didn't hear it. I was so clouded with my own greed and desire for success. I was so overcome with myself and all of my selfish desires and wanting to be known and wanting to look good and wanting to wear good and wanting to drive good. And I was so obsessed with my diamonds and my looks and my food and how people viewed me and how they saw me. That's who I was. And it wasn't until I came to the end of that then I was given a new set of ears. I was given new eyes and hands and a heart. I was amazed when I stepped away from that woman. I was amazed at what I saw. What I saw was nobody helping her, including my friend that was with me. My friend that was with me still was just looking at the tomatoes. Didn't even realize that I had left and walked over slowly. As I heard that scream, took that money out and put it in, and said, "The Lord bless you. God blesses you." So here's what I've noticed. The rich, generally, as a group, help the poor. The poor, generally, help the poor. But you know what I've noticed? Because I've worked with the middle class most of my life. I've studied the rich. I've helped the poor. I've worked with the middle class. What I've noticed is that the middle class generally does not help anyone. Generally, they don't help the poor. In general speaking, the mass populace of the middle class, they're so busy, as I was so busy, with my own debt, with my own needs, with my kids' needs. I was so consumed with just focusing on filling my own needs and my family's needs that I didn't even have an eye or an ear to what real needs actually were. Spoiling my kids, spoiling my husband, spoiling my friends. And for what great purpose? Come on, let me give you an example. What does Christmas look like? It's disgusting. It's disgusting. We're spoiling people with things they don't need. They don't want. They want nothing. It's going to end up in the garage sale next year, but here we are, flustered and figuring out, what am I going to buy Uncle Joe? Or what am I going to get Sarah at the office? And, oh no, what do you buy the person who has everything? You freak out about it. Well, generally the middle class, they don't have an ear for it. And generally speaking, there's a mass populace. I found that to be interesting. But I'm going to tell you, this other class of people, this group of people, this pretty much middle class people, you know what? The ones that God has anointed with special ears and special eyes, ears, heart, stomachs, feet, hands, they have come together, and this is the miracle. They've set a goal to build 1,000 homes for the extreme poor, like Pablo's family. Or like Audalis, who has 4 children and she's a single mother. The fathers have taken off. She has 9-month-old twin daughters. They're 9 months old. And she has to make a decision every day as to whether or not to feed the babies or to feed her 10-year-old son or a 7-year-old son. And is today my day that I actually get to eat? Do you hear what I'm saying to you? This is her life. And so this group of people who once were self-absorbed, that now have been given spiritual eyes and ears and hands and feet, have all come together and said, we're not only going to help Pablo and Audalis, we're going to help 1,000 families get a brand new home. So check this out. This is the craziest, miraculous thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. Look at this. We have the poor who are crying. We have the other who now are purposed. We've married these two groups of people together, and it only costs $5,200 not only to build a house for these extreme poor, but also to put them in business. So for every 100 homes, there's a brand new village that's being built. And in each village, it's going to have a school for the kids. It's going to have a well on every property for every home. They're going to have bathrooms. They're not only going to have a roof over their head, but they're going to have a solid concrete, nice, brand new home with a kitchen, a real kitchen inside their house. They're going to have electricity. They're going to have right outside their house, they're going to have a chicken coop with 1 rooster and 4 hens, which means they're going to have eggs every day that they can feed their family now protein And they can sell the eggs. They can multiply the chickens and sell the meat. They can even start a business if they wanted to, of starting a restaurant if they wanted to, making whether it's sandwiches or chicken, whatever they can do with the chickens. Okay, not to mention, they're also going to have a sewing machine, and sewing lessons are going to happen for the mothers. She's going to learn how to sew. She's going to learn how to make clothes. She's going to also learn how to sell the clothes. They're going to go through 2 years of education, educating them, helping them to be literate, helping them to know how to market themselves, how to be in business, how to manage money, and how to take care of the brand new home that they have because they've never had a home like that. They don't know how to take care of the water. They don't know how to do what needs to be done inside of this new home. So the adults are going to go through 2 years of education. The kids are now going to be able to go to school, and they're going to become literate. They're going to be able to learn how to read. They're going to learn how to write. They're not going to repeat the same level of destruction and desolation that they were born into. The thing that really gets me on this is, imagine this, friend. Imagine this. Imagine you being the kid that you know where you were raised this far, and now all of a sudden, now picture this. Okay, I want you to imagine this, that all of a sudden one day, a group of people that do not speak your language show up in some big machine called a van, something you've never seen before, because you grew up in a village where there's not even horses for transportation. There is no transportation. You're on foot for transportation. So all of a sudden, this huge machine shows up. A small group of people get out. They with an interpreter, tell you to grab your things and come inside this machine. This machine then drives about 30 minutes away to a brand new village. They hand you the keys. They hand your parents the keys and say, God heard your cry. He has answered your cry. This is your new home. Could you imagine being the one receiving those keys? And better yet, could you imagine being of the group that is handing out the keys? Could you imagine? This is a huge miracle. Have you ever heard of something crazy like this happening? Self-absorbed business and career people that were forsaking their families, filling their bellies with more food than they'd ever need to eat in a lifetime, more clothes than they'd ever need to buy in a lifetime, that now are selling clothes. They are now making more money to just give the profits away. Could you imagine? Now think about this. Here's the facts about what the best success book says about this. You see, this is a miraculous thing that has taken place, but it's something that was set in motion thousands of years old. In fact, King David describes a righteous king. He sets it out before us and says, this is how a righteous king should be living. Psalm 72, verse 12 through 14 says this. It says, he's talking about a righteous king, for he will deliver the needy when he cries for help, the afflicted also, and him who has no helper. That's Pablo, that's Sandra, that's Autolus. That's the 310 families that are living in that abandoned mine. Not to mention there's 700 other families that are living in high risk just like that. That we're going to build 1,000 homes for 1,000 families. And Nicaraguan families are big families. So we're talking a minimum of 5,000 lives that are going to be transformed, completely changed forever. Whether it's the kid that watched the miracle, or the parents that experienced it, or you who are a part of that group that got to work now with your hands of purpose to be able to bring this to those people. So here he says, for he will deliver the needy when he cries for help, the afflicted, which means the poor in the translation, the literal translation means the poor also, and him who has no helper. Verse 13 says this, he will have compassion on the poor and the needy, and the lives of the needy he will save. He will rescue their life from oppression and violence, and their blood will be precious in his sight. So King David is saying a righteous king sees the poor as precious. The righteous king can hear their cries and will answer their cries. A righteous leader will see that they have no helper and become their helper and serve them. A righteous leader will rescue them, will redeem them, will take them out of their oppression, deliver them from the violence that is around them because people are hurting so bad they're hurting others, and that their blood, the blood to the righteous, the blood of the poor is precious to them and something that needs to be regarded and taken care of. Versus look at this. We live in a world today that tries to ignore them. We live in a world today that won't even give $5 to be able to help them. Won't even give 5 minutes to listen to a program like this talking about it. This is when we skip the channel and move on to something that we think is more important because we're looking for our own entertainment desires to be filled. And yet he's saying that righteous leadership exalts the poor and holds them up in high esteem and becomes their rescuer, becomes their helper, becomes their one to fulfill their need, that regards their blood as precious. Listen to that. That is such a crazy key that we never hear talked about in churches. We never hear this talked about, and it's absurd to me. It upsets me. We don't hear about this talked about in government leadership places. We don't hear about this in business leadership places. What do we hear? We hear about we're going to meet this sales goals and then we're going to do this or we're going to make all kinds of billions of dollars. That's the same message in the church as it is outside of the church, and you know it. We have pastors that are begging for $1 million this week in the offering so that they can pay the electric bill on a building they should have never, ever built. But here King David is saying that a high level of leadership regards the blood of the poor as precious. Psalms 34:6-7 says this: the poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. Oh my gosh. When I wrote this, I didn't even see what I'm about to say to you. This is crazy. Did you hear this? The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. The angels, God appoints the angels to rescue, to protect, to stand with that group who is taking care of the poor. So those who have a heart for the poor, there's an extra assignment for the angels. That if we rescue the poor, then God rescues us from our enemies. He rescues us from our troubles. He redeems us from our life that is filthy and is a mess. Do you want God on your side? Do you want God helping you with your business? Do you want God helping you with your family? You want God helping you with your health? You want God helping to rescue you out of a big mistake, a big trouble, a big disaster that you made? He's crystal clear that if you help the poor, then he will help you. Deuteronomy 15:11 says this: for the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy, to the poor. That now turns your hand into spiritual hands. No longer natural hands, no longer normal hands, no longer hands that produce nothing, no longer hands that produce evil and wickedness. But when you give to the poor and you open your hand to the needy, you open your hand to the poor, your hands now are blessed. Proverbs 19:17 says this: one who is gracious to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. Listen, our God has thousands of cattle and 1,000 hills. He owns everything. You add up all the billions, it's all his. He can take it away from Bill Gates tomorrow. He can take it away from whoever the Arab is that has more billions than Bill Gates. He can take it away from you. He owns it all. He can take away our next breath. He owns it all. And he says that if we will give to the poor, then he will repay us from his riches. From his. Doesn't get much better than that. Proverbs 21:13 says this: he who shuts his ear to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be answered. And it takes me right back to that place where I was in the market. It was an open air market, kind of like a farmer's market. And seriously, hundreds of people around, all the chatter, and her voice, I hear it. I hear it. No one else heard it. And if anyone heard it, they ignored it. Have we become so callous? Have we become so inhuman? But here's how you learn to hear. It's once you've cried and no one heard you. Don't wait to that point. that you cry out for help and no one helps you. I've been there. I made that horrible mistake of hearing the cry of the poor and ignoring it. And then I cried and I was ignored. There's no pain like that kind of pain. You think being ignored at work was hurtful for you? Try again. Try again. This is a level of not being heard. Oh, my spouse doesn't hear me. Oh, gosh, shut up. You want to talk about crying and not being heard. This is real crying that I'm talking about. The poor. I'm not talking about the poor in the United States of America. They're rich, according to poverty standards all over the world. They are so ridiculously rich and spoiled rotten. I'm talking poor. Proverbs 22:9 says this, he who is generous will be blessed, for he gives some of his food to the poor. Proverbs 22:16 says, he who oppresses the poor to make more for himself, or who gives to the rich, will only come to poverty. We oppress the poor by not helping the poor. We oppress the poor by not answering the cry of the poor. We oppress Pablo, Audalis, Sandra by not helping them, by not bringing food solutions, not just giving them food, but giving them chickens, giving them seed to plant, teaching them how to farm, teaching them how to do these things. This is changing their whole world. Do you understand? So he who oppresses the poor, if we just turn our back and say, no, I'm not going to help them. No, I have bills to pay. No, I have other things to do. We are oppressing the poor. And this is crystal clear. But here's what we do. We go to church and we sit in our $1 million buildings and we give to our pastor who lives in $1 million home. We give to him who's flying a $25 million jet. We give in the offering at church that's providing the brand new Mercedes for the pastor. I'm so sorry. There's something really wrong with that. Proverbs 28:27 says this. And by the way, that says that, so if you oppress the poor, you're ignoring the poor, you yourself are going to become poor. And if you give to the rich, you're done. You're going to come into poverty. So Proverbs 28:27, he who gives to the poor will never want, but he who shuts his eyes will have many curses. Proverbs 29:7 says this, the righteous is concerned for the rights of the poor. The wicked does not understand such concern. So if right now you're sitting there with all kinds of excuses, oh, I can barely pay my bills. Oh, I don't have the money to do this. I don't know. I just lost my job. Okay? You're not hearing the cry of the poor. You're only hearing your own selfish desires. This says the wicked does not understand such concern. I love it when people say, well, Dani, what about right here in America? Listen, we give tens of thousands of dollars a month, every month, from my business to help organizations right here. Yes, orphans right here in the United States of America. Yeah, we do. We help kids come out of the sex trade here in America. We feed the elderly here in America. We do a lot here in America. But they're not poor. They're not poor. Come with me to Nicaragua. I'll show you what poor actually looks like. It might ruin you for life, by the way. You might end up selling your house and some of your clothes. Isaiah 58:6 says this, is this not the fast which I chose? To loosen the bonds of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free? He's talking about fasting, and he's saying that when we break the yoke of oppression and poverty off of somebody else, that we are fasting our own selfish desires. We're fasting, and we're doing something right there. And this is what he said. He says, is it not to divide your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into the house? When you see the naked, to cover him and not to hide yourself from your own flesh, then your light will break out like the dawn, and your recovery will be speedily and spring forth, and your righteousness will go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will cry, then you will call to the Lord, and the Lord will answer. You will cry, and he will say, here I am. God is saying, yeah, fast. Get fast by what? Helping the poor. Listen. In conclusion, we're talking two unlikely groups of people coming together. Two totally unlikely, unrelated groups of people coming together. That's innovative. God is the innovator. He has brought the middle class, who generally could give a rip about the poor, can't hear the poor, could care less about the poor, think they're poor. And then he's taken the poor who's cried out, and he's brought a miracle together. And he said, I'm going to put you two groups together. And 1,000 homes are going to be built as a direct result of that happening. So I know that at this point, you got to make a decision as to which group you want to be in. Because according to all of the wisdom I just read that came straight from the best success book ever written, the Bible, that was written thousands of years ago, that still works today, the promises are still here, there is a financial kingdom, and that kingdom, either you're going to live in God's financial kingdom or you're going to live in this world's financial kingdom. And trust me, there's no comparison. I've lived in both kingdoms. I don't ever want to move from God's financial kingdom. And there's laws in there. And he says this, you get to choose whether or not you want to be rich or poor at this point. Because if you ignore the cry of the poor, then you will be poor. And when you cry, no one will answer you. But if you lend to the poor, you give to the poor, you put them in a house, you bring them food, you help them, you fast something, you give up something of yourself so that you can help someone else get a step up in life, okay? You do that. Now God is saying, now I will bless you. Now I will multiply you. Now I will open up the floodgates of heaven and I will pour it down upon you. So you have an opportunity. How will you step forward from here? There's a group of people that have already done it. I'd love to introduce you to them. You can find them. In fact, I think we're around 800 people. Yep. 801 people have just come together already on one particular website, on one page. If you go to kingsransom.org, again, that's kingsransom.org, right there on the homepage, you'll see, it'll say Santa Pancha, Nicaragua. Santa Pancha, Nicaragua, click on that. It's going to bring you to what we call a group rev page, all right? So there's a revolution that is going on, and this group is revolutionizing an entire nation, starting first with one village and then moving on to the next village and the next village and the next village after that. So you will see that our first goal is to raise $520,000 to complete the first 100 homes. Well, I announced this project about 45 days ago. And in that announcement, it actually first was on Facebook. Things started going crazy, and God has breathed on this thing. We're talking powerful soil that God has given us to be able to sow seed into. And the multiplication that is happening in people's lives already is astounding. So already so far, and this is a miracle. And I know that if you're listening, you've been following this thing on Facebook or on Twitter. We already have $342,000 raised, and we've been doing it for about 47 days or something like that. So already so fast we've done that. Now the goal is 1,000 homes, which means we need $5.2 million in order for 1,000 families to get out of the extreme poverty that they're in and have a life that is now sustained. Not only a house, but sustainability and fresh water and food that they can provide for themselves. So $5.2 million. This is what came to my head. Like, hold on a second. There's people that live in my city that have a home for themselves, their dog, and their 2 children that cost them $5.2 million. For the same $5.2 million, we can build 1,000 homes. 1,000 homes for 1,000 families, right? So what are we looking for? I want to know which group do you want to be a part of. You ignoring this message, you have a great shot, and you hear this as a warning, you have a great shot at becoming one of the poor. If you don't ignore this message and you allow God to bless your ears and make your ears spiritual, you allow him to anoint your hands, and his spirit goes on your hands, and now your hands become purpose. And you allow him to anoint your feet, that wherever you go, you're taking dominion for the poor. That you allow your eyes to see the reality of your current lifestyle, and you look for things to cut out. Kind of like these kids who have set up a birthday page. And basically what they've done is they've said, hey, yeah, I don't want anything for my birthday, but what I would like to do is I'd like to have a goal of building a home for the poor for my birthday instead. Could you imagine? How crazy is that? So here it is. So a kid is setting up a goal to build a house. A 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old. They're saying, don't give me any presents, but what you normally would buy me, whether it was a birthday card or it was a card with cash or it was a gift, don't give me the card. Don't give me the gift. Please just go to this website, King's Ransom, click on Santa Pancha right there in the main thing, or go to the group rev page, grouprev.com/Santa Pancha. In fact, if you're watching this, the link will be posted right there in this post, right on Facebook. Anywhere you look right now, you should be able to find it. But anyway, and they have their own page set up with their goal of how much they want to raise for their birthday for the poor. So not only that, we have musicians. Check this out. We have entire musicians who have come together. They're collaborating, and they're not being paid a dime for this collaboration. They're saying, we're going to build an album and we're going to do a tour, and 100% of the profits of the tour, 100% of the profits of the album goes straight to this project. And they have a goal to raise $100,000. They want to start with $100,000 building homes for the poor. This has ignited something in this people. You see, it's one thing to just write a check, but it's a whole other thing to save a life. It's a whole other thing to start a new life for somebody. And by the way, you will reap what you sow. You focus on starting a new life for someone else that doesn't have a life. Now what's going to come back to you? Yes, people helping you start a new life for yourself and for your family. And this should be a part of what your family is about. It should be a part of what they are, what they represent out there into the world and into the marketplace. So not only that, we have business people. This is crazy. I announced this in Austin, Texas, just a few weeks ago. I announced this in Austin, Texas, and what happened? The people went crazy. $250,000 was raised in just a matter of hours, where people just were given out of their hearts, making commitments. We had one particular businessman that grew up poor, grew up in a single wide trailer with a single mother. His father died when he was 10 years old. And he said, done deal. I am committing my first $100,000 that I make this year is all going to building homes for these people. A businessman who formerly was all about getting rich for himself, that today, because of these new spiritual ears, these new spiritual hands, this spiritual body that he's been given, he's heard the cry from thousands of miles away in a village that he's never been to, and he said, done, the first $100,000 of my business, that's everything. Okay, he's not paying for his expenses. No, the first $100,000 that I make is going straight to this project. Have another businessman that right away said, I'm buying 5 houses for these people. Isn't that crazy? We're talking like, hello, I hope you're, McFly, I hope you're getting this. We're talking to people that once were selfish, self-absorbed. We had this other woman who stepped up, and this is what happened. It was crazy. She grabs the mic and she says, and again, there's 1,200 people in the room. The place was crazy. I lost control of the entire room. Here's what happened. She says, I've been saving money. I've been saving actually over $5,000 for a down payment to buy my first house. The first house I'm going to buy now is for one of these families in Nicaragua. Done. You can have the $5,000 I have in savings that I had for my down payment. I'm buying a house. The first house I buy will not be for myself. The first house I buy is for the poor. Wow. Think about that. That's a miracle. That people that normally never ever think about that, never think to do anything like that, heard the cry and they answered it. Isn't that amazing? That blows my mind. I could tell you stories for hours of what's been happening since we started this. I have another senior citizen who committed for the next 6 months his entire Social Security check. His entire Social Security check is completely devoted to just giving all of it to building houses for these people in Santa Pancha, Nicaragua. Can you believe that? Listen, you might need a phone number. You might want to call in right now, and you might be able to give what you want, give what you can. I don't care if it's $10. I don't care if it's $5. It might be $100,000. You might be that one that can write a check for $5.2 million right now. 100% of the money that you're going to give right this minute is going straight to helping these people get a new home. It is not going to go to the director of a foundation's salary. It's not going to go to the expenses of the foundation. None of the expenses of the foundation are paid by the donation that you're about to make. All of the money you give goes straight to the building cost, straight to the chicken, straight to, the wells being built, okay, being dug. It's going straight to all of it so that we can help these people get into their homes and help it happen fast. I believe that we should be able to complete the first 100 homes before summertime. And I believe that you can be a part of that as well. So if you go to kingsransom.org, again, that's kingsransom.org, right there, it's a big giant banner straight across the top. Click there, Santa Pancha, Nicaragua. You can transform a nation. All right, that's it for me right now. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us for the spiritual equipping special that we had here today. I hope it was a blessing to you. Make sure you get over to kingsransom.org. Make sure you give what you can. You make sure you do the right thing and decide to join me in Nicaragua as one of the top 15 of the promoters for that site. And come on, let's change some lives, starting with them. Then our lives are going to be changed as a direct result. All right, God bless you. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
If this episode was an encouragement to you, go to DaniJohnson.com and share it with your friends now. You never know who else needs to hear it. This has been the Dani Johnson Show. Join us every weekday at 7 a.m. for more insights that will help you get to the life you've always wanted.